Hey everybody, Ed here with the Digital Digest, and today I wanted to share a quick update on my experience with the Microsoft Surface Pro 2. So of course this was a pretty big update, at least in terms of the Surface being a revolutionary product, the first true tablet that also is really a computer. We've got the innards of an Ultrabook crammed into a 2-pound tablet, arguably heavy for a tablet title, but there's no question it is still a tablet. Relatively sleek considering what's actually under the hood. We've got a Core i5 Haswell processor, which brings us greater battery life than the previous generation. That port you're looking at right now is the magnetic pogo port for the touch and type keyboards, which have been completely revamped to include backlighting, so really rounding out a much more polished experience. We've got our micro SD card slot, another pogo port for charging, and a display port out for video out, much like many other Ultrabooks and laptops. Our power button right there. We've also got, I believe that's a microphone up at the top center, even though it's got a speaker grill. On the other side of the tablet, we've got our 3.5mm headphone jack, as well as our volume rocker and USB 3.0 port for peripherals, hard drives, mice, keyboards, whatever it is, jump drives. That's one area where this is a full-blown computer. You don't have to worry about compatibility or drivers. This isn't just a tablet. This is an Ultrabook. You've got 4 gigs of RAM, 128 gigabyte SSD in this particular model. Of course, you do have a digitizer with stylus that comes included. Not expensive though, in case you lose it. I think they run about $30. No improvement on that experience, at least to my knowledge. This didn't bring any revamp in terms of the pen experience. But again, the Haswell chip does bring a pretty big gain in battery life. We're going from about 4.5 to 5 hours on the original Surface Pro generation to anywhere from, I would say, 6 to 8 here with this one. So not quite a double, but close. And that's enough to really justify an upgrade for most users. Screen resolution has stayed the same. Still looking at a 1080p display, which is one of the nicest that I've seen on any tablet. Only a few really outclass it, either because of their resolution or some other subtle differences, but color accuracy here is great, as it has been with the original version, as well as the RT and the sequel to the RT, the Surface 2. So I really like this display. Overall, the build, quality, hardware, all fantastic. But I will point out, everything I just showed on the body is identical to last year's generation. We have a physical button here, which will switch us, to and from our Metro UI, the tablet interface, back to our traditional desktop. We also have access to everything that was in Windows 8. However, we are running now Windows 8.1, and it is a pretty big improvement because we have quick access to all of our applications. That's what the 8.1 update is all about. Quicker access to everything that you need, every application you have, and really 8.1 pulls that off with this menu, and also the searching capability to get access to anything on your system. Now, this 128 gig variety has dual band Wi-Fi capability, so very solid Wi-Fi connection so far. Really haven't seen any drop off. Initially, I said that I thought it was driven by an Intel Wi-Fi chipset. Unfortunately, it seems that is not the case. That was how it was originally spec'd back when things were really just moving around the rumor mill before anything was official. I do not believe that's the case here. I think we have, I'm not sure if it's a Broadcom or Marvell, but it is not Intel. But Wi-Fi nonetheless has done a solid job. I've already demoed web browsing with this computer/tablet, and it does a very nice job. We'll demonstrate some of that right now. Overall, it really is everything you could possibly want in the best of both worlds. The problem is, do you really want that combination? Because what it comes down to is that as you can see right now with the pen, unlike a traditional tablet experience with a mobile OS like Android, something like the Note, where I would be able to scroll with the pen, I'm not able to, at least out of the box right now. It's used for highlighting text, things you would traditionally do with a PC-based stylus. But that's really not what we're talking about, is it? We're talking about performance, multitasking, the ability to jump in and out of different things that we're doing quickly without losing anything. I've got OneNote open there in the background, Bing Sports. I mean, there's a lot of things going on here. It is a full-fledged PC, so limitations aren't what this machine is about. Granted, the i5 Haswell in here is low voltage. It is the same processor you'll find across all of the different Surface Pro 2 builds, and they're all priced out differently according to hard drive capacity. The 64 gig, which again, this is the 128, is priced at $900. The 128 is priced at $1,000. Both of those models have 4 gigabytes of RAM. You can jump up to the next level, at least in terms of storage and RAM. That's 256 at $1,200, and that'll give you 8 gigabytes of RAM. That's probably the best value other than the 128 gig model we're looking at here, especially if you need the extra RAM for some extra multitasking and performance. But you are getting the same Core i5 Haswell, no bump up to i7. I would have liked to have seen that. That would have definitely differentiated the Surface Pro lineup even more so in this second gen. And then you can pick up a 512 gig version, which is absurdly priced at $1,800. Also, it does sport 8 gigs of RAM. Both include the same stylus, and performance is relatively similar. Of course, you just have the bump up in hard drive and RAM specifications. Same chip, again, Haswell, same dual band Wi-Fi chipset, same display port for video out, same HD Intel graphics solution. So nothing has changed in those regards. No question about it, the graphics performance here is better. Eventually, I may get around to doing a gaming demo like I did for the first gen. Games like a lot of the popular Steam titles, Team Fortress 2, they're all going to run very well on here, and that's one of the beautiful things about this. Yes, it's not a portable gaming console, but when it comes to older games like that, which are really fun, and you've got a great 1080p display, there's just a really wide library from a gaming perspective. Of course, you also have the built-in novelty of a kickstand, which is something Microsoft, I won't say pioneered, but certainly emphasized and re-emphasized on this generation by giving it 2 different positions. The standard position is right here. Now you've got a 40-degree position, which really does give it a lot more flexibility. You would think it's a minor upgrade, but as I've mentioned in all of my coverage, it's a serious one. And I really do like the kickstand. In fact, it's my answer personally to the entire question of weight with this tablet. You know, you're looking at a 2-pound tablet that gets less than what you're going to get from most mobile driven tablets. By mobile, I mean mobile processors, whether it's a Tegra 4, Qualcomm Snapdragon 800 Pro, or of course the Exynos 5. All of these top tier processors clearly don't match the Haswell, and the Haswell comes with extra weight. This is a 2-pound machine. As I mentioned, all of the design identical to last gen. Would I have liked to have seen Microsoft redo this a little bit more than just getting the extra range of motion with the kickstand? Sure, but the internals really are, I think, what any user that passed on the first generation were actually waiting for, because battery life is now here. Yeah, you're not getting 10 hours, as I mentioned, like a mobile tablet, again, mobile being the processor, but you are getting zero compromise. And even though you got 2 pounds, you do have a kickstand that now comfortably works not only on a desk, but also on your lap, in bed, something that really changes the way it can be used. Now, the speaker runs along the left and right side right here. You can see that grill finish. That's all the ventilation for this, because after all, this is a computer, folks. Remember that. But then on the left and right side, that's where your speakers are. So they're kind of just built into that seam. And really, the kickstand does make a big difference as I kick it out to the 40 and knock the pen, in my opinion. It really does change the way you can use this device practically. The last generation, it was great to have a kickstand, but it left everyone wishing that the kickstand could move. Fixed angles scare people. I understand why. It's always better to have some kind of kickstand, so here to just have that upgrade makes the Surface Pro 2 better. Unfortunately, as I mentioned before, it's the only actual aesthetic upgrade. The webcams are still both 720p, so no improvement there. And we do have a broader spectrum of configurations. I mean, that's really what this update, as I've mentioned in other videos, seems to be all about. Not really improving the product or redesigning it, but just making sure that people who couldn't buy into the first generation, because even though It was groundbreaking. It was expensive and lacked a lot of options. Well, now they've kept it expensive, but broadened those options so people who are willing to spend the money to get what they want can do exactly that. In terms of the software, I've mentioned before, Windows 8 is great. I didn't mention the Start button because it has been reincorporated. It's more of a Windows button now. If you long press it, it pretty much brings up access to every single possible thing you could need, whether we're talking about the Mobility Center, power options, the system, device manager, network connections. So even just your traditional file explorer, it's all there now, and that's a big deal. As you can see, a little over 96 gigs free right now in the 128 gig version, and I really haven't put anything on here, so that gives you an idea of stock, what you're going to come out of with the Windows 8.1 experience. And I think this is an acceptable amount of storage. Personally, I would stick with the 256, as I mentioned before. I think it's a better value because of the 8 gigs of RAM. Nothing on here is upgradable. If anything breaks on this, you're going to have to rely on your warranty. Keep that in mind. If you want to pick up an extended one, I recommend it because the battery is fixed. Nothing really user upgradable at all. So whatever you buy here, this is what you're going to have to live with. So if you plan on keeping this machine for multiple years, that's why I recommend bumping up to the 8 gigs of RAM in the higher capacity 256 or 512. Again, the 512, way too expensive. But overall, really like this tablet. This is the machine that does it all. There's nothing, when you sit down at the table with your colleagues or if you're in a classroom with other students, there's not going to be any reason that you can't get any task accomplished with this machine. And that's what Microsoft wanted to make with this reference hardware. That's why so many of Microsoft's partners, all of the PC manufacturers, were so hesitant to really launch simultaneously with Microsoft to compete with them directly, because they know that who is going to be better at making a tablet and a tablet computer running Windows than Microsoft themselves. And they've demonstrated that on both generations. Yes, they're both expensive. Some great deals now to be had on the original Surface Pro. I want to point that out. You can pick up the 64 gig at a newfound retail price through Microsoft and pretty much every other retailer in the not so distant future at $699.99, and the 128 gig model is now priced at $799.99. So really affordable if you don't care about the bump up in battery life, because as I've mentioned over and over again, that's the real perceivable gain here besides the kickstand. Everything else pretty much the same. Not the case with Surface 2, on the other hand, which is a complete redesign, not aesthetically, even though it does have a color change, but just about everything else has been revamped. Here, we're just getting Haswell and some more RAM and storage configuration options, and of course that better range of motion in the kickstand. But overall, Windows 8.1 arguably an upgrade in itself, because without this start button, even though we've got one here, clearly nowhere near the same thing, many users that were confined to really being only comfortable with Windows 7, I feel, will now acclimate themselves far better with Windows 8.1, because this is better than the original start button. And that's really what Windows 8 was all about, was improving upon Windows 7. And a lot of people didn't want to take on Windows 8 because they saw all this stuff and just said, this is bad. There's no original start button. It's harder for me to get to my applications. It's cumbersome. I have to learn a new system. And yeah, that in some ways was true, but for the most part, you have to embrace, learn in order to, get ahead in the tech world. That's what Windows 8 really was about, and 8.1 just made it easier for a lot of us. And that's really what the new start button does, because, as I said before, far better than what you got with the original start button. And of course, if you are in the traditional Windows Metro UI platform, then everything is relatively familiar. Your big drawback here on this side, which is really not the focus of the Pro version for me, it's really that it's a computer, because once you've got a full computer in this form factor, you really don't need any of this. Of course, it is nice to be using the Internet Explorer on here. It works well, but it's not necessary because you do have a full computer. One of the nice things of Surface 2 is that you've got that full Flash browser, but here you've got a full computer, so that's not a surprising thing. But let's say you want to stick with the tablet mode, things still work really well. It's just a matter of, do you need it? And I will assure you, I've done demos of this tablet against the Note 10, 2014, it will outclass every other tablet, and it has to. It's more expensive than everything else, has better hardware. It's a computer. If it didn't outperform everything else, then frankly, Microsoft would scrap this entire project. So no compromise here on web browsing, no compromise on productivity, no compromise at all, except for still on the battery life. You're not going to get the 10 hours you'll get from other tablets that run mobile operating systems. But again, the key word there being mobile, this is a dream machine, folks. So basically, the biggest critique still is, as I mentioned before, weight. This thing is chunky, clunky, but if you think about what every other Ultrabook looks like on the market, it is far from chunky and clunky. That's my personal argument. And the kickstand, as I keep mentioning, really does offset the weight, because how many instances will you really find yourself in that you will physically have to hold this and really tote it and take on the weight in your hands all the time? And will you not be able to at least put it on your lap, if not find some sort of desk space in order to prop it up? And I think you'll find that in most cases, you will be able to find a place to set it up. So that in itself right there kind of displaces the weight argument. And that to me already is a big one. I mean, that right now pretty much is the largest critique of this machine. It's built incredibly well, very little backlight bleed, no dead pixels. As I've mentioned, dual band Wi-Fi reception has been very good. The webcams could use improvement, but for Ultrabook class, they're not bad. And I think that's why Microsoft didn't bother upgrading them. They know this still really doesn't compete with anything else in the marketplace. So why do they need to really upgrade something like the webcams when you can't even buy anything else that directly competes with this? Yes, there will be plenty of Bay Trail tablet hybrid options out there. I've already compared this to the Yoga Pro 2, which sports almost identical specifications but has inferior memory, something I do want to point out, single channel rather than dual, I believe. But more importantly, this build quality really is just stupendous. And that's part of what you're paying for with Microsoft. There's a premium, no doubt about it. And even though they didn't improve a lot of things, arguably the things they did improve are the most important ones that almost everyone out there who didn't buy into the first generation of Surface Pro will now gladly opt to. So keep in mind, as I mentioned before, the App Store here is relatively abysmal. You're not going to really find anything that you would with another one, such as iOS or Android, of course. Facebook just added, some standard things here like Open Table. Gaming, very limited, even though you've got strong gaming platform here in this as a computer. You're going to need to use it as that, a computer with Steam, as I mentioned earlier. And because you've got a USB port that can take on just about every peripheral, that means, of course, game controllers, not just a mouse, a keyboard. You can use Bluetooth for that as well. And of course, mass storage devices, hard drives. You're not going to face storage compatibility issues like you would with an Android tablet. Of course, let's forget about iOS on that regard. But again, with this machine, you're not going to hit the wall on anything other than battery life. And you just have to be okay with the form factor. I keep mentioning that because that seems to be everyone's biggest complaint. And I really think when you compare this to anything else, you realize the form factor is ridiculously small and svelte at 2 pounds. Again, the touch and type covers, big improvements. I hope to get one in my possession to show all of you exactly how good the backlighting is. Down the road, also, Microsoft does have some more innovative and new touch covers, or I should just say covers coming out for this for different purposes, different niche markets, including a wireless one or an attachment for it to make the touch cover wireless or type cover. That's really just, a personal preference if you want it detached in a home office setting, I suppose. And then also one that will enhance battery life, in other words, a built-in battery. That's the one that I think is going to be great, not only for this current generation, but the previous generation. If you pick up one of those on clearance, as I mentioned, that could end up being great value because it might get you close to the battery life you get with the second gen for a lot less money. But anyway, that pretty much rounds out my update right now on my experience with this tablet. I like it. If you're wondering why I haven't demonstrated much with the pen, that's because, quite frankly, it's really centric to different applications for different users. And for the average consumer that's going to purchase this out of the box, I can't really guess what all of you are going to be using. I mean, whether we're talking about Photoshop, things like that, sure, you can use that here. It has the proper drivers. It's not Intrig. It is Wacom based, so you're not going to have that issue like you would with something like the Duo 11 or Duo 13 from Sony. But otherwise, there are a whole host of different programs, clearly, that you can use the pen with. It's just that in an Android environment, like on the Note, you get a little bit more of a custom-tailored experience. But clearly, as far as a professional is concerned, you get far more with this because you have a real computer to work with. If you guys have any questions or comments, please feel free to post them. And of course, as usual, please feel free to subscribe. Later.